Millionaire's Haunted Mansion Love Story. It is 2:47 a.m. on Halloween night. Destiny Thornwood stands in the burning ballroom of Ravencrest Manor, the heat pressing against her skin, the fire swallowing every trace of gilded history around her. Her curly hair is singed from smoke, her torn restoration coveralls cling to her, and her brown eyes reflect the flames. She grips the hand of Lawrence Ashford, his platinum hair disheveled, blood streaked at his temple, his storm gray eyes carrying the weight of desperation. Before them, three ghosts materialize in the firelight, one screaming with a voice that rattles the walls, one dripping seawater across the marble floor, and one twisted with rage, her gaze locked on them both. Destiny's voice cuts through the roar of the fire. She tells us she arrived in Newport only 48 hours earlier, hired to restore a painting for $50,000. Now she is trapped in a mansion where the dead refuse to rest, forced to confront a curse that has lasted 136 years. If she and Lawrence fail to reach Lover's Ledge by 3 a.m., they will become the next victims. But how did a simple art restoration job turn into a fight against Victorian-era vengeance and supernatural forces? Tell me where you're watching from, subscribe for tomorrow's story, and thank you for supporting the creation of powerful tales. Let's begin. 48 hours before the fire, Destiny Thornwood arrived in Newport, Rhode Island, carrying a battered suitcase, her restoration kit, and a letter of agreement she still half believed was too good to be true. At 28, she had carved out a reputation in the small world of art conservation, specializing in works damaged by smoke, water, and neglect. Her skills were admired in Savannah, where she'd grown up and built her business, but admiration didn't always pay the bills. For months she had fought to keep her studio open, working out of a converted garage, living on black coffee and determination. The contract from Ravencrest Manor had been salvation. $50,000 for a single painting. No galleries, no museums, no insurance companies quibbling over invoices. Just a private commission, paid in full. The letter bore the Ashford family seal. Her cab dropped her at the southern end of Bellevue Avenue, that legendary boulevard of American excess. The great mansions of the Gilded Age rose on both sides of the street, reminders of an era when railroad fortunes and shipping empires had built palaces by the sea. She passed the breakers, marble and gold shining through autumn leaves, and Rosecliff, white and elegant against the gray sky. Tourists clustered at the gates of Marble House, snapping photos. But when the cab turned toward the far edge of Cliff Walk, the mood shifted. The houses gave way to dunes and jagged stone, the Atlantic crashing below. At the end of the road stood Ravencrest Manor. 70 rooms, towers that clawed at the clouds, gargoyles hunched along the roofline. Where other mansions gleamed with fresh paint and polished brass, Ravencrest seemed to retreat into shadow. The wrought iron gates stood closed, vines choking their design, a brass plate scarred with deep gouges. The driver muttered under his breath, unwilling to leave the cab as Destiny stepped out. The wind carried the sting of salt and the faintest scent of smoke, though no chimney burned. When she asked if he would wait for her, he shook his head quickly and drove away, leaving her alone before the gates. Her fingers brushed the iron as she pushed. The gates resisted before creaking open, the sound echoing across the grounds like a warning. She stepped onto the property, suitcase dragging over gravel, her curls whipped by the October wind. The mansion loomed above, its dark windows staring down like vacant eyes. Only one flickered with light. Third floor, far to the right, an uneven glow that pulsed as if in distress. The oak doors opened before she reached them. Lawrence Ashford 6 stood framed by the threshold. He was tall, his frame elegant but fragile, his platinum hair falling across a forehead pale as candle wax. His tailored suit clung to him as though it belonged to another era. But it was his eyes that held her gray, the color of a storm breaking over the sea. Miss Thornwood, his voice carried the weight of years unused. You came. You're paying me $50,000 to restore a painting, Destiny said, steady despite the chill that ran through her. I would have come if you lived at the bottom of the ocean. His expression flickered, equal parts relief and sorrow. He stepped aside. "Come inside, quickly, before the sun sets." The interior stole her breath. A grand staircase swept upward into shadows, its marble steps cracked. Chandeliers hung dark overhead, their crystals veiled in dust. Wall panels of oak bore water stains, and the carpets that had once muffled the steps of Newport's elite lay faded and frayed. The air pressed against her skin, cold in one corridor, heavy and warm in another, as if the house itself exhaled. She thought she saw movement at the edge of her vision, a curtain shifting where no window was open, a shadow gliding across the far end of the hall. "The painting is in the ballroom," Lawrence said, his steps echoing faintly on stone. "But before we begin, you need to hear the rules. There are 3. She raised a brow. "Rules. First," his voice sharpened, "stay in your room after midnight. Do not respond to anything you hear. Second, if you find a door locked, leave it locked. Do not force it. Third, under no circumstance are you to go into the basement." Destiny forced a laugh. "You make it sound like I signed up for a horror movie." He stopped abruptly, and she nearly walked into his back. When he turned, his face was deadly serious. "This is not a joke, Miss Thornwood. Ravencrest has survived more than a century, but it has never been at peace. Do not test its patience." His tone silenced her reply. He led her to a guest room on the 2nd floor, its furnishings faded but intact. A canopy bed, a cracked mirror, a writing desk overlooking the cliffs. She unpacked slowly, the rules echoing in her mind, the weight of the house pressing down. By the time the grandfather clock struck midnight, she lay in bed, eyes wide open. At first came silence, heavy and complete. Then, faintly, a sound she could not mistake. A woman's scream, high and sharp, cutting through the walls. Destiny sat up, her breath frozen in her throat. The scream faded into something worse, the sound of something heavy being dragged across wood. Closer, closer still. She heard the faint slap of wet footsteps across the hallway outside her door. Water pooling on the carpet. Her hand went to the bolt on the door. She hesitated. The dragging sound stopped directly outside. The footsteps stilled. In the silence that followed, her heart thundered so loudly she feared it would betray her presence. The floor beneath her door darkened with moisture, as if seawater seeped from the very walls. She clutched the blankets tight, remembering Lawrence's warning. "Do not open the door. Do not look. Stay inside." The clock struck 1, and the hall fell silent again. But Destiny did not sleep. The next morning, Lawrence escorted Destiny to the ballroom. The room stretched wide, its vaulted ceiling arched like the ribs of a ship, but time had hollowed it. Chandeliers hung dull with soot, their crystals dull where fire had kissed them long ago. Smoke stains crawled upward along the walls, stopping just below a balcony where an orchestra might once have played. The floor, though scuffed and scarred, still bore the faint inlay of polished oak. At the far end hung the reason Destiny had come, the portrait of Celeste Beaumont. It dominated the wall, taller than a man, framed in gilded wood blackened by heat. Destiny stepped closer, her trained eye taking in the layers of damage. The canvas bore deliberate cuts, not random scratches. A face had been slashed clean through the cheek and across the throat. Water damage rippled through the lower half, the blues and greens warped, as though the sea itself had touched it. Burn marks feathered the edges, the frame blistered in places where flame had once licked. "Who would do this to a painting?" she murmured, leaning close, her gloved hands trembling just above the surface. Lawrence's voice echoed low through the hollow room. It wasn't the painting they meant to destroy. It was the memory. Destiny studied the remnants of color and form. The subject was a young woman, dark hair swept into Victorian curls, her gaze defiant even beneath the scars left by the blade. Her dress had been crimson once, now dulled and mottled. What remained of her hands suggested she had been painted holding a rose. "Celeste Beaumont," Lawrence said quietly. "My great-great-grandfather's love, and the reason for this house's curse." Destiny turned. "Tell me." Lawrence approached the portrait, his storm-gray eyes fixed on the torn canvas. Lawrence Ashford I was heir to this house in 1889. He was wealthy, betrothed to Victoria Pemberton, daughter of another family whose fortune came from shipping. Their union was arranged. It would have united two dynasties. His jaw tightened. But Lawrence had no love for Victoria. His heart belonged to Celeste. Destiny listened, the ruined face of Celeste staring at her from the wall. They met here in this ballroom, Lawrence continued. She was the daughter of a merchant from Providence. Not the match society expected, but he loved her. They wrote letters, carved secret vows into woodwork. On Halloween night, they planned to run away together. His voice lowered. But Victoria discovered everything. She followed them here. What happened that night is recorded in every newspaper of the time, though the truth is far worse. Destiny felt the air shift, a current moving across her skin as if the memory itself lived in the room. Celeste was locked in this ballroom as it burned, Lawrence said. My ancestor Lawrence was found drowned at the base of the cliffs. Some say he fell. Others whisper Victoria's family ensured he never left the water. And Victoria, she lived. She inherited the house, the fortune, the name. She lived long enough to marry again, but never forgot that she had taken everything from them. Destiny's gaze drifted back to the portrait, to the deliberate violence etched across Celeste's painted face. So she ordered this destroyed. She wanted Celeste erased from history, Lawrence said. But hatred has a way of binding itself to stone, to walls, to blood. Destiny touched the frame, her gloved fingers brushing over scorch marks. She noticed something, letters, faint, carved into the wood beneath layers of grime. Not random scratches, but words. She traced them carefully. They left messages. Lawrence's expression darkened. Yes, my ancestor and Celeste both. They marked their secret places. It is said their last vow was never fulfilled, that their souls could not part because their love was denied. Destiny swallowed hard. And now, Lawrence turned from the painting, his shoulders stiff beneath the weight of years. Now the curse holds. Every Ashford heir has felt its reach. My parents 5 years ago, this house burned again. They never left it. I inherited everything, but no matter how many times I've tried, I cannot leave Newport. It pulls me back. Always. His voice cracked on the last word, though he fought to keep it steady. Do you understand why I called you? The portrait is more than canvas. It is the last remnant of Celeste. If she is restored, perhaps her voice can be heard again. Perhaps she can be freed. Destiny's brown eyes fixed on him, then on the ruined painting. She had worked on canvases pulled from flooded basements, pulled from flames, peeled from walls rotting with mildew. But never one that seemed to pulse with grief and rage, never one whose story reached from the grave. She stepped back, her mind racing. You're asking me to restore more than paint, Mr. Ashford. Lawrence's storm-gray gaze met hers. I'm asking you to restore a promise broken 136 years ago. The ballroom was silent. Dust drifted in shafts of pale light, and somewhere in the rafters, a door groaned against its hinges. Destiny inhaled the scent of charred wood still lingering after generations. She turned once more to the portrait, to the face that refused to vanish. For the first time, she thought she saw it move, not with her eyes, but in her mind. Celeste Beaumont, trapped in brushstrokes and ash waiting. By the second day, Destiny had set up her tools in the ballroom. The long oak tables were draped with white cloth, her solvents, brushes, and magnifiers neatly arranged. She wore gloves, her dark curls tied back, her breath shallow as she stood before Celeste Beaumont's wounded portrait. She began the slow work of cleaning, cotton swabs dipped in solution, rolling away years of soot and grime. Every touch revealed more than pigment. The red dress brightened in small strokes, the background's once muted tones hinting at candlelit gold. Yet it was not only color returning. Beneath the paint, her fingers traced what she now knew were deliberate carvings in the frame. She leaned close, her brown eyes narrowing. Letters emerged, faint but deliberate. Our love is eternal. Another marking near the lower edge. Meet me at Ledge, October 31st. Her hand paused. Ledge? The air shifted. She glanced up. For the first time, she saw her. Celeste stood reflected in the cracked mirror across the ballroom. Not a blur, not a shadow. A woman in crimson, her face streaked with smoke, her eyes wet with grief. She pressed her hand against the mirror, mouth opening as if to speak. But no sound reached Destiny. Only the rush of wind against the windows and the faint drip of unseen water. Destiny whispered, "What are you trying to tell me?" Celeste's form flickered, then vanished, leaving the mirror cracked and empty. Destiny's pulse thundered in her ears. She forced herself back to her work, but the weight of unseen eyes pressed harder with each hour. By dusk, Lawrence appeared, silent at first, watching her. His face was pale, his hands trembling against the back of a chair. "You saw her, didn't you?" His voice cracked. Destiny hesitated, then nodded. She was here. She wanted to speak. Lawrence sank into the chair. His storm-gray eyes were hollow. "I dream of her. Every night. But it's worse than dreams. I wake drowning, lungs burning. I wake choking on smoke I cannot escape. I see her eyes through flame, begging me to save her, and I cannot move." His head fell into his hands. "It isn't just memory. I live his death again and again. My ancestors' death. Sometimes I think the curse isn't about the house at all. It's inside me." Destiny's breath caught. She wanted to reach for him, but her hands remained clenched at her sides. "That's why you called me here," she said softly. "Not just to restore her image. You think she's still bound?" Lawrence raised his head, and for the first time, the walls of formality cracked. His eyes were wet, raw. "I'm afraid, Miss Thornwood. Afraid I'll join them." Destiny turned back to the portrait. Something in the gilded frame caught her eye, a seam along the edge faint, hidden beneath dust. She lifted her tools, carefully prying where the gold leaf had cracked. With slow pressure, the panel gave way, revealing a compartment. Inside lay a bundle of aged papers, brittle with time. She slid them free. Love letters, bound with a ribbon blackened by fire. She opened the first page, Celeste's handwriting graceful across the paper. "Meet me at Lover's Ledge. October 31st. At the hour the tide turns. We will be free." Destiny froze. The words matched the carving. Lover's Ledge. Before she could say more, the temperature in the ballroom plummeted. The chandelier above shuddered. Lawrence stiffened, eyes wide. A woman's voice hissed through the air, low and venomous. "Thieves of love. Liars. Traitors." The doors slammed shut. A gust extinguished the lamps. Darkness fell, broken only by the dim glow of firelight flickering across the portrait's surface. Destiny felt a hand clamp around her throat. Invisible at first, then not. A figure formed out of smoke and flame. Victoria Pemberton. Her hair wild, her gown blackened at the hem, her face twisted in rage. Her grip tightened. Destiny clawed at her neck, gasping. Her body lifted from the floor, her boots kicking against empty air. Lawrence shouted, rushing forward. His hands passed through Victoria once, twice, until with desperate force, he grabbed the love letters and held them aloft. "Enough, Victoria." His voice cut through the chaos. "You cannot erase them." The ghost shrieked, sound splitting glass across the windows. Destiny fell, coughing, bruises forming in purple rings around her neck. Victoria vanished in a rush of air that flung the doors wide. Silence collapsed back into the room. Destiny coughed, struggling to her knees. Lawrence knelt beside her, his hands hovering helplessly as if afraid to touch. "I should have warned you she doesn't stop at shadows." Destiny lifted her chin, her voice hoarse. "She tried to kill me. Lawrence, she's not just memory, she's rage, living rage." For a moment, they sat together on the scorched floor, the letters between them. The weight of the curse pressed heavy, but so too did something new, a fragile understanding. Lawrence finally spoke, his voice low. "You could leave now. Walk away. Yet you're still here." Destiny met his gaze, her eyes fierce despite the bruises. "Because I've spent my life fighting to preserve what others tried to destroy. And I'm not stopping now." The silence stretched between them, not empty but full of a strange, unspoken bond. For the first time, Destiny saw not just the cursed heir of Ravencrest, but a man desperate to break free. Lawrence looked at her as though he saw the same in her. The library at Ravencrest was vast. 2 floors of leather-bound volumes rising behind iron rails, ladders stretching upward into shadows. Dust coated the shelves, but the scent of paper and candle wax still lingered. Destiny followed Lawrence to a long oak table where he set down a stack of boxes. Inside were files his family had kept. Yellowed newspapers, handwritten letters, and official records so brittle they threatened to fall apart with each touch. For hours, they pored over the fragments of the past. Headlines told the same story in clipped language. Tragedy strikes Ravencrest. Young heiress dies in fire. Another, Lawrence Ashford lost at sea, body not recovered. Destiny spread them across the table, her gloved fingers tracing the ink that had outlasted generations. But the deeper records told more. Death certificates listing causes drowning, burns, self-inflicted wounds. Testimonies from servants who claimed the fire locked doors on its own, or that seawater rose in rooms far from the cliffs. Marginal notes in Lawrence's father's hand spoke of unrest that grows stronger each October. Destiny leaned back, exhaustion in her eyes. This isn't coincidence. Every heir who tried to resist, every one of them died in October. Always Halloween. Lawrence's expression was grim. It is the pattern. Victoria made sure of it. He laid out the final piece. A page from a journal, written in a hand as sharp as broken glass. Victoria Pemberton's. The ink, though faded, still carried venom. If love defied me, let their souls be bound here. Let this house be their grave, their torment eternal. The heirs will carry it until the line breaks. The walls shall burn, the sea shall claim them, and the blood of Ashford will never know peace. Destiny whispered, she bound them here. She made sure no one could leave. It wasn't just vengeance, it was a ritual. Lawrence's fingers trembled as he closed the journal. And I am the last. If the curse is not broken with me, it ends my line forever. The silence that followed was heavy. The library seemed to hold its breath. Destiny reached across the table, her hand brushing his. You don't have to face this alone. For the first time, his gray eyes softened. Why would you risk it, Destiny? You've known me 2 days. Her lips curved in something fragile, almost a smile. Because I've spent my life fighting to restore things others thought were beyond saving. You're not just a client. You're a man trapped in a story written long before you were born. And maybe it's time that story changed. The distance between them shrank. He let her hand rest against his thumb brushing her skin as if it were the first real touch he'd shared in years. She turned her gaze back to the scattered letters. Celeste and Lawrence planned to meet at Lover's Ledge, didn't they? It's in every letter. That was supposed to be their freedom. Lawrence nodded slowly. But they never made it. The fire, the drowning, their pledge unfinished. Destiny's breath caught as the pieces formed. What if that's the key? What if their love was never sealed? And that's what traps them here. If we can finish what they began, stand where they meant to stand, at the time they meant to stand there, maybe we can release them. He stared at her, torn between hope and fear. Lover's Ledge, October 31st, 3 in the morning. That's when the tide turns. The words hung in the air like a vow. They worked in silence until midnight, the wind rising against the mansion's stone walls. When the clock struck, the library doors rattled on their hinges. Destiny froze. Lawrence's breath came sharp. The air thickened with heat, then cold, the temperature swinging violently as books toppled from shelves. Across the room, shadows deepened into form. 3 figures emerged at once. Celeste, her crimson gown tattered by flame, her face streaked with tears. Lawrence Ashford I, dripping seawater onto the carpet, his eyes hollow with death. And Victoria, towering in black, her face twisted in triumph and rage. The 3 spirits converged, filling the room with sound, the crackle of fire, the crash of waves, the scream of betrayal. Windows shattered, wind howled, the floorboards beneath their feet groaned and split. Destiny clutched Lawrence's arm as cracks shot across the ceiling, plaster raining down. The house itself seemed to bend under the weight of their return. Celeste reached out, her lips forming words Destiny could not hear. Lawrence, I stared directly at his descendant, as if begging him to act. But Victoria's laugh drowned everything, her voice curling like smoke. You cannot change what is written. The Ashfords will die as they always have. Burn. Drown. Break. The floor shuddered, a long fissure splitting the library rug in two. Destiny pulled Lawrence toward the doorway, but the wood warped under invisible force. She pressed close, her voice steady despite her fear. This isn't the end. We know the truth now. We know where to go. Lawrence met her gaze, determination hardening his features. Lover's Ledge. At the tide's turn. The house screamed again, but Destiny held onto his hand. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The morning of October 31st began not with silence, but with violence. At 6 o'clock sharp, the mansion roused itself. Doors slammed without warning, rattling on their hinges until the frames cracked. Windows refused to open, trapping them in stale air that shifted from freezing to stifling heat in minutes. At breakfast, a chair hurled itself across the dining room, splintering against the wall. Destiny didn't scream this time. She simply straightened her shoulders and muttered, "She knows we're ready." Lawrence barely touched his food. His storm-gray eyes stayed fixed on the ballroom door, as though expecting it to burst into flames again. By mid-morning, Destiny suggested they begin their preparations. The love letters had been clear. Celeste adored burgundy roses, and Lawrence I had promised her sea glass gathered from Cliff Walk as proof of his devotion. Those tokens, combined with the pledge at Lover's Ledge, would be their anchor against Victoria's hold. The garden had withered under years of neglect, but Destiny knelt in the brittle soil until she uncovered a stubborn cluster of roses. Their petals, though fading, still carried a dark richness. She clipped a dozen stems with careful hands. The thorns pricked her palms, drawing blood. Lawrence stepped forward, gently wrapping her hand in his handkerchief. "Every Ashford heir shed blood for this house," he murmured. "But maybe yours will mean something different." They said little as they walked the cliff walk, the Atlantic crashing below, the path slick from morning mist. Destiny spotted fragments of sea glass glimmering in the rocks, green, blue, and white softened by decades of waves. She filled her pocket, her fingers brushing the cool edges. Lawrence collected a single piece of cobalt, holding it as if it belonged to someone he had once known. By noon, the manifestations grew sharper. Celeste's figure flickered in hallways, her lips moving in silent pleas. Lawrence I appeared on the staircase, dripping water that pooled across the marble floor before vanishing. But Victoria grew more dangerous. In the study, she forced Destiny to watch a vision of another Ashford heir, Lawrence's uncle, trapped in a bathtub as water rose past his chin. His screams gurgled, his eyes wide with terror until silence swallowed him. Destiny gasped and stumbled back, clutching the desk. Lawrence caught her, steadying her against his chest. "She wants you afraid," he whispered. "That's her weapon." But Destiny could see the cracks in him, too. In the drawing room, Victoria conjured another vision. His father engulfed by fire, his mother pounding on a locked door until the ceiling collapsed. Lawrence's composure fractured. His breath turned ragged as he pressed his forehead to Destiny's shoulder. "I've known," he admitted through clenched teeth. "Since the day the house came to me, I've known how this ends. I told myself I'd die trying, just as they did. But meeting you," his voice broke, raw and unguarded, "you make me think I could live. For the first time, I want to believe in something other than the curse." Destiny's hand cupped his face, firm and grounding. "Then hold on to that. We're not here to repeat history. We're here to finish it." The rest of the afternoon they spent in preparation. Destiny bundled the roses in cloth, wrapping them carefully as if they might shatter. Lawrence sealed the sea glass in a small velvet pouch. Together they reviewed the letters, studying Celeste's words. "At the ledge, we are free. At the ledge, nothing can part us." But Victoria did not rest. Every hour she returned, dragging the past into the present. They saw Lawrence clawing at a locked ballroom door, as smoke suffocated him. They saw Celeste pounding her fists against iron bars, her gown alight. They saw Victoria herself, alive and triumphant, watching their suffering with cold satisfaction. The visions wore at them, body and spirit. By evening, Destiny's eyes were rimmed with exhaustion, and Lawrence's hands shook as he folded letters to distant relatives, his last will written in trembling ink. At the final stroke of 6, the entire mansion groaned. Chandeliers swayed though no wind stirred, mirrors cracked in unison, and walls bled long, dark streaks. It was as if the house knew the night had come, and its hunger would not be denied. Destiny stood in the center of the ballroom, roses clutched against her chest. "This place doesn't want us to win," she said, her voice low but steady. "But it's not about what the house wants. It's about what Celeste and Lawrence wanted." Lawrence stepped beside her, sliding the pouch of sea glass into her pocket. "Then let's give it to them, no matter what she throws at us." Their eyes met, a shared vow unspoken. The night had arrived. The hour of reckoning was only hours away. At exactly 11 o'clock, the first shift came. The grand chandeliers flickered, their bulbs bursting one by one until only candlelight remained. The polished floors warped underfoot, their modern repairs peeling back like skin until Destiny and Lawrence stood upon boards scarred by a century-old fire. Curtains once replaced by velvet drapes shredded themselves, reforming into the patterned silks that had framed Ravencrest's ballroom in 1889. The air itself thickened, perfumed by smoke and salt water, forcing Destiny to cover her mouth. Lawrence's grip on her hand tightened. "She's pulling us into it, the night it all began." The transformation was not illusion alone. Across the ballroom, 2 figures materialized. Celeste Beaumont, radiant in a crimson gown, her hair pinned in curls, her smile hopeful as she clutched Lawrence Ashford Eye's hand. The young heir wore a dark suit, his face flushed with anticipation. They whispered to each other, unaware of the centuries watching them. Destiny's throat ached. "They're preparing to run." "They never made it," Lawrence whispered back. "She won't let them." As if summoned by his words, Victoria emerged. She towered near the ballroom's grand staircase, her gown black as midnight, her expression carved in fury. This time her presence was no faint echo. She was whole, her shadow stretching across the walls as if the house itself bowed to her command. "You think to change what cannot be changed." Her voice cracked like thunder. "You will burn as they burned. You will drown as they drowned. You are mine." The doors slammed shut with such force the glass panes shattered inward. Flames burst from the walls, racing up the columns, crawling across the ceiling in jagged lines. Destiny yanked Lawrence toward the nearest exit, but the handles melted before her touch. Victoria laughed, lifting her hand. Furniture tore itself from the ground, chairs, tables, even sections of the balcony railing, and hurled toward them with bone-crushing speed. They ducked, a chair splintering against the floor inches from Destiny's head. Lawrence pulled her toward the ballroom's far end, but the fire spread faster, forcing them into a shrinking circle of safety. "Do you feel their screams?" Victoria hissed, stepping forward, each stride leaving scorch marks. "Your line will end here, Lawrence. Tonight, your blood joins theirs." The floor erupted. From the cracks rose figures, servants long dead, their eyes hollow, their limbs stiff as though dragged from coffins. They staggered forward, skin blackened with ash, hands reaching for Destiny and Lawrence. Destiny swung the bundle of roses like a weapon, the thorns tearing through one phantom's face, scattering it into ash. Lawrence seized a broken piece of wood, wielding it as a club, striking down another that lunged for Destiny's throat. But for every figure they destroyed, more emerged. The ballroom was no longer merely a place. It was a battlefield stitched together by memory and rage. A scream split the chaos. Celeste had turned, her ghostly form flickering as she realized what was unfolding. Her gaze locked on Destiny, her lips moving desperately, this way. Destiny froze, her body caught between heat and shadow. She saw Celeste gesture toward the far corner of the ballroom, where an old servant's door stood half hidden behind a mirror. Flames licked at its edges, but it remained intact. She's showing us. Destiny shouted over the roar. The passage, there's a way out. Victoria shrieked, her face distorting with rage. No, she belongs to me. Her arms shot out, and the phantom surged forward with renewed strength. Lawrence caught Destiny's wrist, dragging her toward the corner. A spectral servant clawed at his shoulder, leaving bloody scratches that burned. Destiny swung the roses again, thorns slicing through ghostly flesh, buying them a moment's reprieve. As they reached the mirror, the fire roared higher. Victoria's form expanded, her face stretching across the ceiling, her voice shaking the beams. You cannot carry love through fire. You cannot steal them from me. Destiny shoved at the mirror. It groaned, resisted, then cracked down the center. Behind it, a narrow servant's door revealed itself, leading into darkness. She pulled it open, shoving Lawrence through first. The heat singed her back as she turned one last time. Her eyes caught the portrait. The restored canvas she had labored over for 2 days now blazed, flames consuming Celeste's face. Every careful brushstroke, every hour of restoration, destroyed in seconds. No, she gasped, stumbling toward it. Against all reason, she reached into the fire, snatching the small stack of letters she had hidden earlier. The edges curled and blackened, but the words remained. Celeste's voice, her promise, still intact. Lawrence seized her waist, pulling her through the door as the ballroom collapsed behind them. The last sound Destiny heard before the door slammed shut was Victoria's scream. Rage unending, hunger denied. The doors of Ravencrest burst open with a deafening crack. At 2:47 a.m., Destiny and Lawrence staggered into the night, coughing from smoke, their clothes scorched by flame. Behind them, the mansion blazed like a beacon of destruction, the inferno so large it could be seen from downtown Newport. Shards of stained glass shot outward with the heat, scattering like knives across the front lawn. But there was no time to stop, no chance to watch the house collapse. 3 figures followed them into the night: Celeste, dripping seawater, Lawrence Ashford Eye, face pale as death, and Victoria, her twisted smile illuminated by the fire. Unlike the others, she did not fade at the threshold. She grew stronger. "Run," Lawrence gasped, pulling Destiny toward the cliff path. The cliff walk stretched ahead, a jagged artery of stone carved into the coastline. Darkness pressed from all sides, broken only by the red glow of fire behind them and the silver gleam of waves smashing 200 feet below. The path was narrow, treacherous, shifting beneath their steps. Destiny gripped the letters tight against her chest. "She won't stop. She can't," Lawrence said through clenched teeth. "She's tied to this moment." Victoria's shriek tore through the night. Wind howled in answer, whipping the sea into white rage. The earth trembled underfoot as sections of the path crumbled, stone dropping into the waves. They pressed forward, stumbling, half-dragged by desperation. Every step was a battle. The cold intensified until Destiny's breath steamed in the air. Shadows clawed at her ankles, trying to drag her from the path. Lawrence beat them back with the broken piece of wood he still carried. Halfway along the walk, Victoria struck. Rocks tore free from the cliff face, hurled toward them like missiles. One grazed Destiny's shoulder, spinning her sideways. She slipped on loose gravel, her heel hanging over empty space. Lawrence lunged, catching her arm just as Victoria's laughter rolled across the coastline. "You are theirs already," Victoria cried, her voice amplified by the wind. "The sea waits for you," as it waited for him. Destiny scrambled back onto solid ground, chest heaving. For the first time, she saw fear etched deep in Lawrence's face, not fear for himself, but for her. They pushed on, the path narrowing further. At one sharp turn, the ground split open beneath Lawrence's feet. His weight tipped forward, his body pitched toward the waves. "No!" Destiny screamed, throwing herself onto her stomach, her hands seizing his arm just as his legs dangled over the abyss. Spray from the crashing tide soaked his clothes, pulling at him, dragging him toward the fate of his ancestor. Lawrence met her eyes. "Let me go. This is what it wants." Her grip tightened, knuckles white. "Not this time." With a cry, She pulled with every ounce of strength. The gravel cut into her skin, blood seeping across her palms, but she hauled him back onto the path. For a moment, they lay together, gasping, their foreheads pressed close. The reversal of history was not lost on either of them. In 1889, Lawrence Ashford I had fallen to the sea. Tonight, destiny had chosen differently. The ground shook again. Victoria descended upon them, her form towering, flames from the mansion casting her in hues of red and black. "Defiance will not save you," she screamed. "No one escapes the curse." Destiny forced herself to her feet, dragging Lawrence with her. The letters in her hand burned hot, as if the ink itself carried Celeste's plea. The cliff opened ahead, a widening clearing that locals still called Lover's Ledge. The ocean stretched wide, a void filled with thunderous waves. The wind quieted for an instant, as though the earth held its breath. At 2:56 a.m., they reached the edge. Two new figures shimmered into being, more solid than before. Celeste and Lawrence Ashford I appeared in full. Young, beautiful, their hands entwined as they had been on the night of their planned escape. They turned, surprised, seeing their descendants standing at the cliff with firelight chasing their heels. The past and present collided in that single moment. 5 figures now stood at Lover's Ledge. Destiny and Lawrence in flesh and blood, Celeste and Lawrence I as echoes of love never fulfilled, and Victoria as a spirit fueled only by rage. The tide surged below. Midnight approached. Victoria's form towered over them. Her rage condensed into a hurricane of wind and fire. "You defy what was meant to be," she screamed, her voice shaking the rocks beneath Lover's Ledge. These lovers were punished for daring to cross the boundaries of their world. "And your soul belongs to me." Destiny stepped forward, her hands trembling, but her stance firm. "No," she said, her voice steady despite the heat from the flames behind them. "Love does not belong to anyone but those who choose it. You say they deserve pain, that history must repeat itself, but hate is not stronger than hope. Fear is not stronger than courage. We decide what survives, what ends, and what carries forward." Lawrence tightened his grip on her hand. The wind howled, tossing them both, but her words anchored him. They didn't have to be in love yet. That was not the point. Choosing the possibility of love, facing the risk of heartbreak together, that was the defiance that mattered. Victoria's face twisted, her screams rising to a keening pitch. Flames whipped around her, forming shapes of fire and shadow, but destiny held firm. Your anger cannot bind them any longer. It cannot dictate their fate, or ours. At 3 a.m., the witching hour struck. The clock of the mansion, or what remained of it, tolling invisibly in the night, marked the moment. Destiny and Lawrence locked eyes, clasped hands, and made their pledge. Not for the past, not for what had already happened, but for the possibility of love, trust, and hope. The air trembled. Celeste and Lawrence Ashford I felt it, their hands still entwined. Slowly, their forms glowed, a radiant golden light expanding outward, illuminating the cliff and the waves below. Victoria's screams shrieked higher, but the light consumed her form, unbinding her fury. The last echoes of her rage dissipated into the night. Celeste and Lawrence I finally kissed, their bodies luminous and free. Slowly, they lifted from the stone, ascending over the ocean like twin candles carried by the wind. Their faces turned toward Destiny and Lawrence, smiles of profound gratitude shining across the night. The past's agony had ended, and the present held a new promise. By dawn, the fire had died, leaving ash where Ravencrest Manor had once stood. The first light painted the Atlantic in shades of gold. Destiny and Lawrence stood on Lover's Ledge, holding hands, breathing in the calm after a night that had rewritten history. 6 months later, Beaumont House rose in place of the old estate, a boutique hotel celebrating love that had crossed boundaries. The restored portrait of Celeste Beaumont remained, untouched by fire, now with Lawrence Ashford I added beside her, their hands joined in eternal peace. The opening night of Beaumont House drew couples from near and far. Guests wandered the ballroom where the fire had raged, now polished and gleaming. Some noticed two translucent figures dancing quietly among the revelers. Celeste and Lawrence I, visiting the living to see the love they had fought for reflected in the world they had left behind. Destiny and Lawrence danced for the first time as an engaged couple. The chandeliers sparkled above, the music floated, and outside, the Atlantic breeze carried the faint memory of laughter and freedom. Their pasts had been heavy with curses, loss, and grief. But now the future held choice, love, and light. Destiny leaned her head on Lawrence's shoulder. "We chose hope," she said. "We chose each other." Lawrence smiled, storm-gray eyes soft with warmth. "And we honored them. We ended the cycle." The camera would linger on the restored portrait, showing Celeste and Lawrence I watching approvingly, their smiles faint but unmistakable. It was a silent promise. Love endures, hate cannot control, and courage matters. Where are you watching from tonight? If this story inspired you, subscribe to follow tomorrow's tale. Thank you for supporting the stories that honor love, courage, and the power to break cycles of fear.